What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We've got some nice sun out there today. Hopefully we're looking forward to a big weekend of footy for round 3. And today we're going to be having our first edition of our buy, hold and sell. So I'm going to start with Mr. Josh Schuster. So going to be coming in on the second row this week. And what we will see from him is it's at least 3 weeks of work. So people, everyone's jumping on him straight away, and fair enough. He's that type of player that we've seen in the past, like when Ewan Aiken came on the scene, when Jack Bird did, Bradman Best last year. Actually, is it the same round that did Best start in round 3 last year? We'll have to get someone in the comments to let me know. But he's that type of player that when he gets a chance to play on the park, he should be able to score pretty well. You can see last week, pretty much played the whole game and got 40 tackles, no attacking stats to get 47. So he's someone that you can bring into your team and play straight away, and you'd expect him to make a fair bit of cash. So at 301k, there's not much risk involved there, but yeah, there's something to think about, that he might lose his spot after 3 weeks. But just have a think about the fact that Josefsky got dropped, so there's a chance that if Schuster plays well, he might keep that edge when Sirinen comes back. That's going to be somewhere between round 6 and round 8. So something to think about there is also if Foreign or DCE gets injured, there's a chance that he keeps playing. And we've done this in the past where that young guns come in and we're like, oh, he only gets 3 weeks, and sometimes like, oh, it's not worth it for him to make enough money. But these type of good players, they always get a chance, and we didn't think Schuster would play anytime soon, and he gets on the bench for round 2. And there's a chance he heads back to the bench for a little bit, after those first 3 or 4 weeks that he gets in second row. But we'll have to work that out from there. But I definitely think he's a buy to start off our chat here. And we're going to go for Shawnee O'Sullivan for our next one at 319k. He's someone that's going to get a little bit extra time to play for the Warriors. So there you go, finally loaded. 319k, break even to 25. So if you wanted to, you could sit on him for a second. We've got Schuster in with the 5 break even. So with Sean O'Sullivan, we have a little bit of data to go off too. And he played with the Broncos last year, and had a little bit of time from round 16 onwards, but only got the 3 games there, and played at 5/8. And you can see that even there, he's still getting a decent amount of kick meters, and has the rest of the games at halfback in 2019, where he's only got 1 score under 30, which is really cool. So with him, I don't think you're going to be worried too much about him losing you money or not making you money. You'd expect him to average somewhere in the 30s. I think will be pretty safe. The odd 40 or 50 game where he scores a try or gets some attacking stats, but he's someone that does make a fair few tackles, which is good. Majority in the 20s and 30s there. He does miss a bunch of tackles, but he runs the ball a bit, he kicks the ball, the odd offload and tackle bust, which should at least get him in the 30s and make you $100 or so $1,000, and he's a little bit safer than someone like Schuster, but I think Schuster has a lot more upside than someone like O'Sullivan. But I think he's definitely worth a buy, but you could wait a week if you wanted to with O'Sullivan and see how he goes. And if he picks up a 40 or so in the first game and looks great, then you could lock him in. And if you've got a half or so that gets injured, obviously if you have CHT, then O'Sullivan is not a bad little downgrade option. For our next one, just want to talk about it. Someone like Daniel Alvaro. So that's a really nice break even this week at 1. And if he can score around that 40 mark, then he's going to be up in the 500s really quickly. So he only needs to do that for the first 6 weeks, and he'll very quickly be up in the 500s. And if you didn't get him in the last week or two, if you didn't start with him or got him last week, then you still have an opportunity to bring him in now. I think if you miss out on him this week and he gets a 40, then I don't think you should be picking him up from here. So last chance for someone like Alvaro, but I think he's definitely a buy. He's gonna get around that, 36 minutes in the first game. I'd say that would be his low, and you'd expect games around the 40. He was at about 40 or 41 last game before coming back on for the last 8 or 9 minutes there. So around 40 minutes for a point a minute is going to be good for him. Already in 10.5% of teams, so it looks like a bunch of people have brought him in this week already. The only other one that's really important, I think, at this stage is someone like Jayden Brailey, and I think he's definitely taken a step up from last year, a break even of -10. So again, probably one of the last chances to try and pick him up if you don't want to miss out. And he's already gained over 100k, owned by 35% now. He was at 28% last week. someone that I don't think will be averaging 78, hitting 78s and 84s regularly, but something in around the 50 mark would be something that I think would be ideal. He's obviously got 2 really high tackle games and got some attacking stats in both. But if you can expect tackles somewhere in the 40s and a few meters gain and the odd attacking stat, then an average of around 50 would be pretty cool. And he's still got even an average of 50, at least 150k to gain there with someone like Jayden Brailey. And I just want to have a look at some other guys to buy, but this is more around bringing in those consistent keepers. So we've seen a couple of games now, and there's a big list of those types of guys. And obviously you've got someone like Cleary, but he is a chance of being out this week. But for feeder, these are the guys in our people's team that you could possibly bring in. Then you got Teddy, Pappenhausen as sort of your guns that might be interesting to bring in. But if we have a little scroll down the side here, we've got Payne Haas coming back, will be next week. But Cook's obviously consistent. Had his super low game last week, but then has his really high game, so he's going to be averaging in the 60s again. DCE, same thing, had a tough start to the year, but then got back to his normal 60 odd last week, and he's going to be someone that's going to be averaging around that 60 mark. Reid Mane, you'd expect to. I'm expecting him to average around 60 this year. Could be that Api Korosaiu level, 60 to 63 there for the most part. He'll have the odd game around the high 40s to 50, and then a bunch of games, a bit higher in the 60, 70 when he makes big tackles and gets some attacking stats. Someone like Tohu Harris is really cool. Isn't going to play Origin. Is a dual position. He's going to be really consistent each and every game. Moses is always goes pretty well. Same thing last year. He smashed the start of the year, did really well, and then fell off a bit at the back end. So if he can keep that for the majority of the year, then he's going to be great and getting you around that high 50s to 60 average. Ben Hunt, same thing, he's really taken over this Dragon side and played amazing on the weekend and had a good round 1 as well. So he's someone that has the dual position and could be really helpful for anyone's side. He's very consistent. He's normally around that 55 point score at half, so maybe he's a 55 to 60 this year. Carrigan, I'd probably avoid if you haven't got him at this stage. If you have him at the moment, I definitely think he's a hold, which we'll talk about in the next one. But he's someone that is getting a few less minutes and isn't as consistent. Frizzell's always been consistent. So I'm same with Isaiah Yeo, Flanagan, McCulloch. We could go down the line here of all the guys that are pretty consistent, and they're all going to be good options. Cam Murray, Chaboyevich, I wouldn't go for just because he doesn't have that upside. Junior Paulo, Mitch Barnett are all really cool. Mitch Barnett, do we think he can keep the goal kicking? That's going to be the thoughts. If you think he can keep that, then he's going to be a mid-50s scorer, which puts him, a little bit undervalued, but not too much. He's already at 714, but the middle and the edge combination without Origin is pretty enticing. Pierce is consistent, but I don't think he'll average that high. Saifidi, same thing, around that 50. You got and then you're getting down here to some guys that are a little bit less consistent and aren't going to average close to 60. Tarpany, same thing, you'll be around that 50 odd. Hudson Young should be around the 50s as well. And then you've got guys like Fogarty and Keary, these types of guys that should be somewhere in the mid 50s of an average as well. Munster always seems to be around the 50 mark. So these are kind of the guys you want to be looking at if you're looking to bring in a keeper. If you've got a couple of mid-rangers that you'd like to bring one up to a keeper and bring one down to a cash cow, then they're the types of guys you want to be looking at with that. So our next section, we're going to go to the holds, and my first important one I think is going to be AJ Brimson. So has dropped a bit of cash, but moves down to 591k. Had his lowest ever score, apart from a 29-minute game, but when he's got decent minutes, that's his lowest score in the last couple of years with 12, and you won't expect that again. He had 4 errors in that game and only 83 meters, so that's very, very different to what his normal games are, and you can liken it a little bit to his first game back last year, and it just wasn't a good game for him, and you'd expect him to, his normal lower games around that 30 mark, and then when he gets his attacking stats to go bigger. I think you should hold him this week, at least 1 to 2 more weeks, just to give him a chance, because he's going to be really annoying if you trade him out and then he averages 50 like he did last year and he's a keeper. So I wouldn't be thinking about getting rid of him at this stage. That's just my opinion, but if you need to, you can go for it. Right, so we move to Roger, and he's someone that I have in my team, and He's averaged 38.5. I don't know why people would be too stressed about him. Yes, a break even of 57, but he's a keeper and has been for the last, 6-7 years. Just needs some attacking stats to do really well. So if these are his base numbers, he's getting 170, 218 meters. This is perfect. There's no issues there. Got a couple of try assists last week to make 44, but he's only had 4 tackle breaks. So don't stress about Roger. Make sure he is a hold in your team. Someone else I think is a really good hold is Turpin at 544. Everyone was so excited about him after round 1. He got 53. Why are we thinking about dropping him now, right? Yes, he got 32, but that whole game, none of the middle forwards did well. Carrigan got 39. Tino got 25. All these guys in the middle didn't do as well, and you've got guys like Tessianu and that getting a lot of meters and attacking stats on the edges. So Feeder scored 2 tries on the left, so think about that with these types of guys. The game will be played a little bit closer to the middle. He has games where he's got 64 tackles, right? He's regularly in the high 30s and 40s and has more meters gained. He didn't kick out a dummy half at all, had 3 missed tackles, which is, not his standard. So just had a really, really low game, and he's someone that I think you could average closer to 50. And if you trade him out now, I think that's pretty silly. He's at least going to make his break even this week is my big call this week. But you can make your decision on that one, but I think he's definitely a hold. Someone else I think is a hold is Mr. Jake Averillo. A lot of people are trying to punt him early, and I think even though he hasn't played that well, with him, I think you can just hold him just for the cover, right? He has 4 centers. I don't. Even if you've got like an Opacek, a Momorowski, a Tessianu, if you've got 2 of them, right? Averillo sitting on your bench. If one of those goes down injured, do you want to trade? Like if they're out for a week or they get suspended, do you want to trade one of those decent centers for another center and just keep playing that center roulette? I don't. I'd rather Averillo be there, and there's a chance that he comes good as well. He's obviously had the elbow injury. He's come up against a couple of decent sides in the wet. He hasn't run that much, so I think there's a chance. This is his floor at 20. He's not going to lose you much money. He's had 2 crap games, and his break even's 28. So he's not going to lose you much money. And I think there's only upside for him. And you've got the half and the center dual position. So if you can trade anyone else to bring in a Schuster, I would, but I'd try and keep Averillo for this week. Also, someone I think is a hold for this week. Might not be much longer, but is Lachie Croker. So he managed to make some cash last week and score well, 52. I wouldn't be trying to play him, just with Cade Cuss looking to be on the bench again. There's a chance he might not play and Lachie plays some bigger minutes, but he's going to make his break even of 8. Even if he scores in the 20s, he's going to make, he's going to get up to about 350k. If he scores a 30 or 40, then him being a cash cow really starts rolling, and you can make some good coin there with him and get him up closer to 400 at least before you move him on. So again, someone that you could play this week if Cleary doesn't happen to play, but he's someone that I think you should hold this week if you have the opportunity to. Should you trade Schuster for him? Again, I'd probably try and pick someone else, one of your mid-rangers that aren't doing as well, or a few people have some of these wing fullbacks that aren't doing that great. They're the kind of guys I'd be looking at moving on instead of him. Dylan Walker is someone that I think you should hold for this week. They've had 2 really tough games. The first 2 games, it was they have Bunnies and Roosters, is that right? So, for him to have those 2 games, had a bit of a shocker first game, which is fair enough. Against the Roosters, they got absolutely hammered, and he didn't look amazing under the high ball, which he didn't look again. But he's going to get the chance. I think you should have him for another week or 2. Again, has the dual position, but 28 last week, got the 5 tackle breaks, 130 meters. So if he does that again with a few attacking stats against an easier side this week, against the Dragons, it should be a much closer game. I think that he's worth keeping and playing in your centers this week if you have him as someone in your team. And the other walker we're going to go through is Cody, guys. If you're enjoying this channel, guys, please hit that like button, hit subscribe. We're doing really well. I really appreciate all the support. We're getting a lot of comments now on these videos. We're doing good. But Cody Walker had a bit of a slow start. He's got 46 in the first game, which was fine, and then 31. If you've got him in your team, I think you have to hold him for a little bit longer, right? He did get the try last game, but just didn't do too much other than that. Obviously, his kick meters are not something that's very normal for him to get, but usually running for a lot more meters than what he did last week. He's normally up, you can see 70, 80, 90, 100 plus. and he's going to be someone that's going to do really well in a few games and then not so well. He's much more of a roller coaster than even Latrell can be sometimes. So I think you should at least give him another crack. He's going to have a pretty big game this week, but if you look at these kind of keeper level guys are going to have good games against the good teams and against the lesser teams as well. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. But if he gets past the Roosters, then he's got the Bulldogs, the Broncos, the Tigers, and the Gold Coast Titans. So 4 much easier games than what he's come up against at the start. Obviously, this Eagles game was a bit different, but it's hard for these guys on the edges in the wet games that they're not going to do as well as some of the middle forwards. So Cody, I'd say, is definitely a hold. Now we're going to move on to the sell side, and unfortunately, someone like Api Korosaiu is going to be a sell this week, 774k. He's going to be out for about 6 weeks, so I think you should move him on. I wouldn't be selecting someone like Kenny, but you can trade him to any of those guns I spoke about in the buy section there. Someone like Taumololo, also a sell, out for a few more weeks. I think he can't hold that much money on the bench. And can we just talk about how good that photo is of him eating his popcorn? Anyway, Lola has to move on. Someone I also think is probably a sell is going to be Ryan Matterson, unfortunately. He hasn't had the best start. Got 51 the first game, 31 this one in the 46 minutes. So he's someone that does really well when he's on the field and can averages around 60 very normally. But break even at 86, and there's he's definitely out this week. There's a chance he's out for a bit longer. He's had a bit of an issue with concussions over the last few years, and this one didn't look very good at all. And you can see why Felice Kafusi got a few weeks in the suspension for him. So Matterson, I feel like it's going to be something that lingers for a couple of weeks, and if it does, you have to get rid of him now. I think if you would like to see if he plays the following week, then please do. But I think that he's probably a sell when this stage of the season, when you've got obviously a lot of trades up your sleeve, and then I think you can straight swap him for someone who's a 60-point scorer, and it's going to help you stick with the ranks and the scores they're doing well. Someone else who's obviously an obvious sell is Andrew Davey. He's out for the year. Did his ACL unfortunately, and had some decent scores, but not much we can do there. If you brought him in last week, unfortunate for you, but you're gonna have to get rid of him. Same with Chanel at 493k. Good thing is he's obviously made a little bit of cash for anyone who brought him in, but the 2.6% of teams that have him are going to have to move him on. And someone like Schuster or O'Sullivan are a nice straight swap that you can play in the halves as well. And probably going to be an important swap given if you have Cleary and Harris Tavita, for example. So that's that one. Someone else I think is a sell is Corey Allan, 355k. You can see what happens when you move from a good team in the Rabbitohs to a pretty poor team in the Dogs, that your scores just don't translate. He is someone that had pretty good base stats at the South, and he just hasn't picked up on that form since he's moved over to the Dogs. And in a team that isn't going to go hasn't been going as well, I don't think he's going to score amazingly. I think he'll do better over this next few games, but he does have Rabbitohs and Melbourne coming up after this Broncos game, so he could score well this week if the game's a little bit drier and he can do a little bit more. But going forward, I don't see him doing well. So I think he's the first of the sells in the wing fullbacks, and we'll talk about a bunch of other guys in the wing fullbacks now as a bit more of a collective. But we'll start with someone like David Mead, and if you started with him, then that's okay. But if you didn't and you brought him in last week, then I feel sorry for you, because he's definitely a sell. That first game was out of nowhere, right? Against a pretty good Eagles team. He played like one of the games of his life, basically. A couple of line breaks through the middle, got his try, did really well. But this is very much more like his base stats. 100 meters, no real tackles, a couple of misses, a random offload. That's kind of his normal game. And in a Broncos team that's not great, I don't think he's going to score well and needs to be a sell. But if you look at some of the other wing fullbacks, then around that price down the bottom, you got guys like Simonson, who's was never someone that's going to make you cash. He gets a try assist, he gets 20 odd, he gets 19 in his normal games. Fuster needs to go as well. He is not going to score much more than 18, 25 as a max. We talked about Mead, Stafford Toa, Remus Smith. Play much better this game, and if you had him, then he's definitely a hold. Kapoa. Who else we got? Matty Moylan, I think, is a sell. Yes, he played alright that first game, but yeah, who have they got coming up? Does it tell us? Yeah, like you got Para coming up next, and games are going to be a little bit harder, and he shouldn't score as well. Yes, it was wet on the weekend, so he didn't, wasn't able to do as much, especially with the footwork, and someone that had a bunch of injuries. So, yeah, he could score okay, but I think if you can, I'd swap him to someone like Schuster or O'Sullivan. I think they're going to score much better than what Moylan will. Cody Ramsey again, not too great at 338. You could probably move him on if that with that experiment didn't go as well. Who else we got there? That's kind of the majority of them. Jason Saab. He's someone that's got to go. Never really scored well in the past, and in a Manly team that's not great, and he doesn't have those base stats, so he's going to be someone that has to go as well. But there you go, guys. That's the first buy, hold, sell edition. For this one, in the Q&A we'll talk through a little bit more about guys like Josh Jackson, Elliott, Barnett, these types of players that people are asking me about, and we'll go from there. But I hope you enjoyed that one, guys. As I said, please hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying this, and we'll see you in the next one. Have fun.